That was your last ride, Coach.
I was lying under my '98 Chevy pickup in the driveway, wrestling with a rusted exhaust pipe, when I heard my daughter Lila's voice cut through the October night like a blade. Mom, you deserve better than this. You deserve real love, not some washed-up parts guy who peaked in high school. I froze, wrenched halfway to the pipe joint. The words hit harder than any punch I'd taken in my amateur boxing days. Through the gap under the truck, I could see their silhouettes on the front porch. My wife, Bernice, pacing in her expensive heels. Our 23-year-old daughter gesturing wildly with her phone in hand. "Lila, keep your voice down," Bernice hissed. The neighbors already know, Mom. Mrs. O'Hara asked me yesterday if you and Dad were having problems. She said your car's been gone a lot of nights lately. I slid out from under the truck as quietly as possible, my back screaming from the cold concrete. Our house, a modest two-story fixer-upper I'd been working on for 15 years, suddenly felt like a stranger's place. The peeling white paint on the porch columns, the sagging gutter I kept meaning to fix, the dead roses Bernice had planted and forgotten about. Everything looked different when you realized your own family saw you as the neighborhood failure. "Your father is a good man," Bernice said, but her voice lacked conviction. "He provides for us. Barely. Do you know what my friends say when I tell them my dad manages a warehouse? They look at me like I'm making excuses for being poor." I wiped my hands on my coveralls and stood in the shadow of my truck, invisible to them but hearing every word. The streetlight cast a yellow glow over our small front yard, highlighting the cracks in the driveway and the rust stains on my truck. This was my kingdom, this falling apart piece of the American dream in a dying town outside Schenectady, New York. "Money isn't everything, Lila," says the woman who maxed out 3 credit cards last month. "I saw the bills, Mom. I know about the second mortgage." My blood went cold. Second mortgage. I handled all our finances. There was no second mortgage. "That's none of your business," Bernice snapped. "It is when you're asking me to lie for you. When you want me to cover for your girls' nights that happen to coincide with Jeff's CrossFit schedule." Jeff. The name hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. Jeff Maloney, coach to his gym rats. A 44-year-old ex-jock who ran the CrossFit place downtown. All charm and muscle, with the kind of smile that made middle-aged women forget they had husbands. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything, Mom. I'm telling you straight up. Either you figure out what you want, or I'm done being your alibi. I won't lie to Dad anymore." The front door slammed. Lila had gone inside, leaving Bernice alone on the porch. I watched my wife of 26 years lean against the railing, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Instead, I slipped around to the back of the house and entered through the kitchen door. By the time Bernice came inside, I was at the sink, scrubbing grease from my hands like nothing had happened. "How's the truck coming along?" she asked, her voice artificially bright. "Same as always. 1 step forward, 2 steps back." I dried my hands on a dish towel and looked at her. Really looked. When had she started wearing makeup to bed? When had she begun staying up late, texting on her phone with that secretive smile? "I'm going up to shower," she said, already heading for the stairs. "Bernice?" She paused, one hand on the banister. "Everything okay? You seem distant lately?" Her laugh was too quick, too sharp. "Just tired, Jean. Work's been crazy." "Work?" "Right." Bernice was a paralegal at Hutchins & Associates, the biggest law firm in the county. She'd been there 12 years, working her way up from secretary to senior paralegal. It was good money, better than what I made at the warehouse, and she never let me forget it. "Maybe we should plan a weekend away, just the two of us." "Maybe," she said, but she was already climbing the stairs. "After things settle down at the office." I stood in the kitchen, listening to her footsteps overhead, then the sound of the shower running. The house felt hollow around me, like a shell with all the life sucked out of it. On the counter, Bernice's phone buzzed with a text message. I shouldn't have looked. In 26 years of marriage, I'd never violated her privacy. But something in Lila's words, something in the way Bernice couldn't meet my eyes, made me pick up that phone. The message preview on the lock screen made my world tilt sideways. "Can't wait to see you sweat again tonight. Hope the hubby doesn't mind you working late again. Jay." My hands shook as I set the phone down. J for Jeff. Jeff Maloney, with his perfect abs, his motivational Instagram posts, and that self-righteous CrossFit gym where my wife had been working out 3 nights a week for the past 6 months. I walked to the living room window and looked out at our street. Mrs. O'Hara's house across the way glowed with warm light. She was probably in there right now, cataloging every car that came and went, every argument that carried across the neighborhood, every sign that the Braun family was falling apart. The shower was still running upstairs. I had maybe 10 minutes. I grabbed Bernice's purse from the kitchen counter and rifled through it with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 30 years organizing inventory. Credit card receipts, gas station purchases, and there, a hotel receipt from the Pine View Motel out on Route 9, last Tuesday night. The same night she'd told me she was working late on a big case. My phone had the Find My iPhone app linked to her account, something we'd set up years ago for emergencies. I opened it with trembling fingers and checked her location history. Tuesday night, Pine View Motel. Thursday night, Pine View Motel. Saturday afternoon, Jeff's CrossFit gym, then the motel again. The shower stopped running. I shoved everything back into her purse and was sitting in my recliner, remote in hand, when she came downstairs in her robe. "What are you watching?" she asked. "Nothing good." I flipped through channels, my mind racing. "Hey, didn't you say you were working late Tuesday? I thought I saw your car at that motel on Route 9. She froze for just a second, long enough for me to know I'd hit the target. "You must have seen someone else's car. I was at the office until almost midnight." "Must have been..." I kept my voice level, casual. "You know how all those silver sedans look the same." She kissed the top of my head, a gesture that once meant everything and now felt like a betrayal. "I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed. I'll be up in a bit." After she left, I sat in the dark living room staring at the blank TV screen. Outside, a car drove slowly down our street, its headlights sweeping across the wall. Mrs. O'Hara's curtains twitched. The old busybody never missed anything. I thought about the man I used to be. Gene Braun, amateur boxer, tough enough to go 10 rounds with guys half my age. Gene Braun, high school football player, strong enough to carry his teammates off the field. Gene Braun, young husband and father, stupid enough to believe that love and hard work were enough to build a life on. Now I was just Gene the warehouse manager, Gene the neighborhood joke, Gene the guy whose wife was screwing the local musclehead while his own daughter called him a washed-up loser. I pulled out my phone and looked up the Pine View Motel on Google Maps. 15 minutes from our house. 15 minutes from Jeff's gym. Convenient. My reflection stared back at me from the black TV screen. Graying hair, lines around my eyes, the soft gut of a man who'd traded his boxing gloves for a desk job. When had I become invisible? When had I stopped being a man worth fighting for? The house creaked around me, settling into the night. Upstairs, Bernice was probably already asleep, dreaming of her muscle-bound trainer with his fake tan and his protein shakes and his hands all over my wife. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window. Mrs. O'Hara's light was still on. The old woman had lived across the street for 40 years, watching families come and go, marriages rise and fall. She'd seen it all, and she remembered everything. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd pay Mrs. O'Hara a visit. Maybe bring her some of those cookies she liked from the bakery downtown. Maybe have a nice, long chat about the neighborhood, about who'd been coming and going, about what she might have noticed lately. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in 30 years of managing inventory, it was this. You can't fix a problem until you know exactly what you're dealing with. And I was just getting started. Mrs. O'Hara was watering her petunias when I walked across the street the next morning, a box of chocolate chip cookies from Murphy's Bakery in my hand. She looked up with the bright-eyed interest of someone who'd been waiting for this conversation. Gene Braun, as I live and breathe. What brings you to my little corner of paradise? Thought you might like some cookies, Mrs. O. You've been such a good neighbor all these years. She set down her watering can and wiped her hands on her apron. At 78, Maureen O'Hara was sharp as a tack and twice as dangerous. She'd outlived 2 husbands and knew every secret on Maple Street. Come in, come in. I'll put the coffee on. Her kitchen was a shrine to decades of neighborhood gossip. Photos of block parties, church functions, and family gatherings covering every surface. She moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been hosting impromptu interrogations for half a century. "So," she said, settling into her chair across from me, "how are things with you and Bernice?" Straight to the point. I had to admire her technique. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Lila mentioned you'd asked her about problems." "Oh, honey." Mrs. O'Hara's face softened with genuine sympathy. "I didn't want to say anything, but I've been worried about you." "What have you seen?" She poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, taking her time. "Your wife's car has been gone a lot of nights lately. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Always the same pattern. Where does she say she's going? Work, according to Lila. But Jean, I've been watching this street for 40 years. I know the difference between someone working late and someone having an affair. The words hung between us like smoke. Having it said out loud made it real in a way that finding the hotel receipt hadn't. There's more, isn't there, Mrs.? O'Hara nodded. That personal trainer from the CrossFit place, Jeff something, he's been driving down our street, slowly, like he's checking to see if your truck is in the driveway. My hands tightened around the coffee mug. When? Same nights Bernice is gone. He drives by around 7, then again around 9. Never stops, just looks. Son of a witch. Language, dear. But her eyes were twinkling with the satisfaction of someone who'd just delivered a perfect piece of intelligence. What are you going to do about it? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? Roll over and play dead like the neighborhood joke everyone expected me to be? Or remind them that Gene Braun still had some fight left in him? I'm going to handle it. Good. That woman doesn't know what she's throwing away. I finished my coffee and stood up. Mrs. O, can I ask you a favor? Anything, honey. Keep watching. And if you see anything at all, you let me know. Her smile was predatory. It would be my pleasure. I walked back across the street feeling lighter than I had in months. Information was power, and now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. The question was how to use it. That evening, I told Bernice I was going to mix gym to work out. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did go to the gym. But first, I made a little detour to the Pineview Motel. The place was exactly what you'd expect from a roadside motel that rented rooms by the hour. Peeling paint, broken neon sign, parking lot full of potholes. I parked behind the dumpster and waited. At 8:47 p.m., a silver BMW pulled into the lot. Jeff Maloney stepped out, looking around nervously before walking to room 237. He was dressed in his usual uniform. Tight Under Armour shirt, designer jeans, and the kind of confidence that came from never being punched in the face by an angry husband. 15 minutes later, Bernice's Honda Accord pulled up next to the BMW. I watched my wife of 26 years walk across that parking lot like she owned it. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Red, tight, expensive. The kind of dress that said she was done being Gene Braun's wife and ready to be Jeff Maloney's whatever. They met at the door to room 237. He pulled her close, kissed her like he'd done it 1,000 times before. She laughed at something he whispered in her ear, and the sound carried across the parking lot like a slap. I sat in my truck, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching my marriage die in real time. 26 years. A house, a daughter, a life built from nothing, and she was throwing it away for a muscle-bound pretty boy who probably couldn't spell commitment if you spotted him the first 6 letters. But as I watched them disappear into that motel room, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. This wasn't just about love or midlife crisis or whatever BS excuse she'd eventually try to feed me. This was about respect, about being taken seriously, about showing everyone in this small town that Gene Braun wasn't the joke they thought he was. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. The cars, the room number, the timestamp, evidence. Then I got out of my truck and walked over to Jeff's BMW. The car was pristine, detailed, waxed, probably cost more than I made in 6 months. I pulled out my keys and dragged them along the driver's side door, spelling out a simple message. Hope you're insured, coach. Then I got back in my truck and drove to Mick's gym. Mickey Sullivan had been running Sullivan's boxing gym for 30 years. It was the kind of place that smelled like sweat and dreams, where kids from the wrong side of town came to learn discipline, and men my age came to remember what it felt like to be dangerous. Mick was working the heavy bag when I walked in, his movements still sharp despite being 63 years old. He'd been a contender once, back in the 80s, before a detached retina ended his career. Now he trained fighters and dispensed wisdom to guys like me who needed to hit something. Gene Braun, haven't seen you in here for months. What brings you back? Need to hit something that won't press charges. He stopped punching and looked at me with the kind of attention that made him a good trainer. Woman trouble, the worst kind. Cheating? Bingo. Mick nodded and tossed me a pair of gloves. Bag work first, then we'll talk. I spent an hour beating the heck out of that heavy bag, working out months of frustration and humiliation with every punch. My hands were raw inside the gloves, my shoulders screaming. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Afterward, we sat in Mick's office, sharing a beer and talking strategy. So, what's your plan? He asked. Still working on it, but I'm not going quietly. Good. Never liked seeing good men get walked on. He took a long drink of his beer. But Jean, listen to me. Whatever you do, be smart about it. Don't let anger make you stupid. What do you mean? I mean, don't swing wild. Use your head. Hit them where it hurts. Their pride, their reputation, their wallet. But don't give them anything they can use against you in court. Smart advice. Mick had seen plenty of good men destroy themselves trying to get revenge on cheating wives. The key was to be surgical about it. Precise. Thanks, Mick. I needed to hear that. Anytime. And Jean, come back tomorrow. You're going to need to be in shape for whatever's coming. I drove home to find Bernice's car in the driveway. She was in the kitchen, still wearing that red dress, making herself a cup of tea like she'd just come home from Bible study. How was your workout? She asked, without looking at me. Productive? How was work? Long. Tedious. You know how it is? I poured myself a glass of water and studied her face. She was glowing. The kind of post-love glow that I hadn't seen in years. It should have made me angry, but instead I felt that cold calculation settling deeper into my bones. Bernice, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? With us? With our life? She finally looked at me, and for just a moment I saw something that might have been guilt flicker across her face. That's a strange question, Jean. Is it? We've been married 26 years. We barely talk anymore. When's the last time we went on a date, just the two of us? We're not kids anymore. This is what marriage looks like after 26 years. Is it? Or is this what it looks like when one person stops trying? She set down her teacup with more force than necessary. I'm tired, Jean. I'm going to bed. It's only 10:30. I said I'm tired. She left me standing in the kitchen, alone with the smell of her perfume and the knowledge that my wife was a stranger. But that was okay, because strangers were easier to destroy than family. I pulled out my phone and looked at the pictures I'd taken at the motel. Clear, undeniable evidence of her betrayal. But evidence was just the beginning. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. I opened my laptop and started researching. Jeff Maloney's business license, his gym's financial records, his social media accounts. Everything was connected if you knew where to look. By midnight, I had a plan. It wasn't pretty and it wasn't nice, but it was thorough. And when I was done, everyone in this small town would know exactly what kind of man Gene Braun really was. The old Gene would have confronted them, demanded explanations, probably ended up looking like a fool. But the old Gene was dead. He'd died in that motel parking lot, watching his wife choose someone else. The new Gene was going to be much more interesting. I woke up the next morning to find Bernice already gone. No note, no explanation, just the lingering smell of her expensive perfume and an empty coffee cup in the sink. Lila was at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with the focused intensity of someone building their personal Brand One Instagram post at a time. Where's your mother? Early meeting. She didn't look up from her phone. She said she'd be home late tonight. Another late night. Seems like she's had a lot of those lately. Now Lila looked at me, her eyes sharp with challenge. Maybe if you gave her a reason to come home, she would... What's that supposed to mean? It means maybe if you were more than just a guy who fixes trucks and complains about everything, she wouldn't need to find excitement somewhere else. The words hit like a physical blow. My own daughter, looking at me with the same contempt I'd been seeing in Bernice's eyes for months. Excitement like Jeff Maloney? Lila's phone slipped from her fingers. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You've been covering for her, making excuses, providing alibis. How long have you known? Dad, How long, Lila? She picked up her phone, not meeting my eyes. 3 months, maybe 4. And you said nothing. What was I supposed to say? That my middle-aged parents were having problems? That my mom was finally happy for the first time in years? Happy? She's having an affair. She's alive again. Do you know what it's like watching your mother turn into a ghost? Watching her pretend to be satisfied with this? She gestured around the kitchen, at the peeling wallpaper and the ancient appliances. You stopped trying years ago, Dad. You stopped seeing her as anything more than someone who does your laundry and splits the bills. I stared at my daughter, this stranger who looked like the little girl I used to read bedtime stories to, and realized I'd lost her too. Somewhere along the way, while I was working 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat, she'd decided I wasn't worth defending. So you think she's right to cheat? I think she's right to want more than this. Lila grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. I'm spending the weekend at Jessica's. Try not to burn the house down while I'm gone. The front door slammed, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my family. But instead of the crushing despair I'd expected, I felt something else. Clarity. They'd made their choice. Now I could make mine. I called in sick to work, first time in 5 years, and spent the morning implementing phase 1 of my plan. I started with the finances. Bernice and I had separate checking accounts but shared savings. I transferred every penny from our joint accounts into an account she didn't know about. My emergency fund that I'd been building for years. $43,000. Not bad for a warehouse manager who supposedly never amounted to anything. Next, I called Lila's college and put a hold on her tuition payments. When the bursar's office asked why, I explained that we were restructuring our family finances and would need to reassess our ability to pay. The hold would take effect immediately. Then I drove to Jeff's CrossFit gym. Maloney's Fitness was everything you'd expect from a place that catered to suburban housewives and weekend warriors. Motivational posters, gleaming equipment, and a juice bar that charged $12 for a protein smoothie. Jeff was in the middle of leading a class, shouting encouragement at a group of women who were probably all fantasizing about taking private lessons. I waited in my truck until the class ended, then followed Jeff to his BMW. He was checking out the damage I'd done to his paint job, his face twisted with rage. "Excuse me," I called out. "You're Jeff Maloney, right?" He turned, and I got my first close look at the man who was sleeping with my wife. Handsome in a generic way, with the kind of artificial tan that came from a bottle, and the overdeveloped muscles of someone who spent more time looking at himself in the mirror than actually using his strength for anything useful. "Yeah, who's asking?" "Jean Braun. I think you know my wife, Bernice." His face went pale under the fake tan. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You know her real well. Biblically, you might say, 'Look, man, I don't want any trouble.' Neither do I. That's why I'm here to make you an offer." I stepped closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne and see the fear in his eyes. For all his muscles, Jeff Maloney had never been in a real fight in his life. "You're going to stop seeing my wife. You're going to tell her it's over, that you found someone else, whatever story you want to tell. But you're going to end it." "And if I don't?" I smiled, and something in my expression made him take a step back. "Then I'm going to make your life very interesting. See, Jeff, I know things about you. I know your gym is 3 months behind on rent. I know you've been selling steroids to high school kids. I know about the white powder you keep in your office safe. You can't prove any of that, can I? I've been doing inventory for 30 years. I know how to track things, how to document them. And I've got friends in interesting places." It was mostly BS, but Jeff didn't know that. He was the kind of guy who cut corners and bent rules, which meant he had plenty to hide. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear from my family's life. Completely. And just to make sure you don't change your mind." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos from the motel. "I've got insurance." Jeff stared at the pictures, his jaw working like he was trying to think of something threatening to say. But we both knew he was beaten. "You're crazy." "No, I'm motivated. There's a difference." I got back in my truck and drove away, leaving him standing next to his vandalized BMW. Phase 2 was complete. That evening, I was at Mick's gym when my phone started buzzing with calls from Bernice. I let them go to voicemail while I worked the heavy bag, imagining Jeff's face with every punch. The voicemails were increasingly frantic. "Jean, call me back. There's been some kind of mistake with our bank accounts." "Jean, where are you? Lila called crying about her tuition. What's going on?" "Jean, I'm coming home. We need to talk. Now." I finished my workout and drove home to find Bernice's car in the driveway and every light in the house blazing. She was waiting for me in the living room, still in her work clothes, her face a mask of controlled fury. "What the heck do you think you're doing?" "Evening to you too, honey. How was work?" "Don't play games with me, Jean. Where is our money?" "Safe. Secure. Under my control." "You can't just steal our savings." "I can't steal what's mine. Check the account statements. My name is on everything." She was shaking with rage. "And Lila's tuition? On hold pending a family discussion about priorities and honesty? You bastard! You can't punish our daughter for what? For covering for your affair? For calling me a loser? For choosing sides in a war I didn't start?" Bernice's face went white. "I don't know what you think you know. I know about Jeff. I know about the motel. I know about the lies, the excuses, the late nights that aren't about work." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. "I know everything." She stared at the pictures, and I watched 26 years of marriage crumble in real time. "Jean, I can explain." No need. It's all very clear. You decided I wasn't enough anymore, so you went shopping for an upgrade. How's that working out for you? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is, what happens now? She sank onto the couch, suddenly looking older than her 49 years. What do you want? I want my wife back. But she doesn't exist anymore, does she? The woman I married wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have turned our daughter against me. She wouldn't have mortgaged our house to pay for her boyfriend's failing business. How did you? I told you, I know everything. The second mortgage, the credit card debt, the money you've been funneling to Jeff's gym. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Bernice buried her face in her hands. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. And now we all have to live with the consequences. So what? You're going to divorce me? Take everything out of spite? Maybe. Or maybe I'm going to let you stew in the mess you've made while I decide what kind of man I want to be going forward. I headed for the stairs, then paused. Oh, and Bernice, Jeff won't be returning your calls. We had a conversation today. Man to man, he's decided to focus on other opportunities. The sound she made was somewhere between a sob and a scream, but I was already climbing the stairs, leaving her alone with the wreckage of her choices. In the bedroom, I packed a bag with enough clothes for a few days. I had somewhere else to be, somewhere I could think clearly about my next move. As I walked past the living room, Bernice looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Where are you going? The lake house, Mom's old place. I need some space to figure out what comes next. Jean, please, can't we talk about this like adults? Adults don't sneak around motel rooms, Bernice. Adults don't lie to their families for months. Adults don't mortgage their homes to fund their affairs. I paused at the front door. But don't worry, I'm not done yet. This is just the beginning. The drive to my mother's old cabin took 40 minutes, winding through the hills outside town to the shores of Sacandaga Lake. The place had been in my family for 60 years. A simple two-bedroom cottage that my father built with his own hands, and my mother left to me when she died. It was perfect for what I had in mind. Isolated, private, and completely under my control. I sat on the porch with a beer, looking out at the dark water and planning my next move. Bernice would call Jeff, probably drive to his apartment or the gym. She'd find out that he'd already started distancing himself, making excuses, maybe even blocking her number. Then she'd realize that her safety net was gone. No husband, no boyfriend, no money, and a daughter whose college fund had just evaporated. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. Dad, what's going on? Mom is freaking out and Jeff won't answer her calls. I typed back, ask your mother. She has all the answers. Another buzz, this time from Mrs. O'Hara. Saw Bernice leave in a hurry. Everything all right? Everything's perfect, Mrs. O. Thanks for keeping an eye on things. I finished my beer and went inside to plan phase 3, because this was far from over. I'd taken away their money and their security, but I hadn't touched the thing that would hurt them most, their reputations. In a small town like ours, reputation was everything, and I was about to show everyone exactly what kind of people they'd been defending. The old Jean would have been satisfied with confronting them privately, maybe getting a quiet divorce and moving on with his life. But the old Jean was dead. The new Jean was just getting started. I woke up at the lake house to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Bernice, Lila, even a few from numbers I didn't recognize. The panic was spreading, and I hadn't even played my best cards yet. The most interesting message was from Jeff. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. I called him back while making coffee on the cabin's ancient percolator. Jean, look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Coach. You've been screwing my wife. I have pictures. What's to misunderstand? It's not that simple. Bernice said you two were separated, that you were basically roommates, and you believed her? Or did you just not care as long as you were getting what you wanted? Silence on the other end. Then, what do you want from me? Nothing anymore. You already gave me everything I needed. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're about to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong family. I hung up and opened my laptop. Time for phase 3. I'd spent years managing inventory systems, tracking shipments, organizing data. Those skills translated perfectly to social media warfare. I started with Facebook, creating a simple post in the Schenectady County Community Forum, a group with over 15,000 local members. Has anyone else noticed the increase in personal trainers who seem more interested in training married women than helping them get fit? Asking for a friend whose wife has been working out at strange hours? I didn't mention names. I didn't have to. In a town this size, everyone would know exactly who I was talking about. The post got 37 likes and 12 comments within an hour, including one from Mrs. O'Hara. Some people have no shame. Prayers for your friend. Next, I called Hutchins and Associates and asked to speak with the senior partner, Harold Hutchins himself. Mr. Hutchins, this is Jean Braun. My wife Bernice works for your firm. Of course, Jean. Bernice is one of our best paralegals. What can I do for you? I wanted to give you a heads up about a situation that might affect her work. She's been having an affair with a local business owner, and it's gotten pretty messy. I'm concerned it might become public and reflect poorly on the firm. There was a long pause. I see. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. We'll look into the matter. I appreciate your discretion, Harold. I know how important the firm's reputation is to you. Indeed. Thank you for the call, Jean. By noon, Bernice's car was back in our driveway. I watched from across the street. I'd driven back to have lunch with Mrs. O'Hara and get a front row seat for the fireworks. She looks upset, Mrs. O'Hara observed, peering through her lace curtains. I imagine she does. What did you do? Just leveled the playing field. My phone rang. Bernice, of course. Jean, you need to come home right now. I'm comfortable where I am, thanks. Harold Hutchins called me into his office. Someone told him about Jeff. They're putting me on administrative leave pending an investigation into my personal conduct. That's unfortunate. Maybe you should have thought about that before you started conducting your personal business in motel rooms. You son of a witch. You're destroying my career over this. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. Isn't that what you lawyers are always talking about? The truth. This isn't over, Jean. You're right about that. I hung up and turned to Mrs. O'Hara, who was practically vibrating with excitement. What else do you have planned? Phase 4 starts tonight. Want to come for a drive? At 7 p.m., Mrs. O'Hara and I drove past Jeff's CrossFit gym. The parking lot, usually full on Tuesday nights, had maybe 6 cars in it. Word was spreading faster than I'd expected. Looks like business is slow, Mrs. O'Hara observed. Amazing how quickly people lose interest when they find out their trainer has been sampling the merchandise. We drove to the Pineview Motel next. I'd called ahead and spoken to the manager, a guy named Rick who'd been running the place for 20 years. Rick, this is Jean Braun. I think my wife has been renting room 237 pretty regularly. I can't really discuss our guests. I'm not asking you to. I'm just letting you know that there might be some reporters or private investigators asking questions soon. Divorce proceedings, you understand. Might want to make sure your security cameras are working properly. Oh, yeah, okay. Thanks for the heads up. The motel's neon sign flickered weakly in the growing darkness. Soon, everyone would know what kind of establishment the Pineview really was and who had been using it for their secret meetings. You're really going to destroy them both, aren't you? Mrs. O'Hara asked. They destroyed themselves. I'm just making sure everyone gets to see the wreckage. We drove back to Maple Street to find Lila's car in the driveway next to Bernice's. The family summit was about to begin. Want to come in and watch the show? I asked. Wouldn't miss it. Mrs. O'Hara and I walked across the street like we owned the place. Because, in a way, we did. In small towns, information was currency, and we were about to become very rich. I opened the front door to find Bernice and Lila in the living room, both of them looking like they'd been crying. They looked up as I entered, followed by Mrs. O'Hara. What is she doing here? Bernice demanded. Mrs. O is here as a witness. I want everything that happens tonight to be properly documented. Dad, this is insane, Lila said. You can't just destroy our family over this. I didn't destroy our family, sweetheart. Your mother did that when she decided I wasn't worth being faithful to. So you're going to punish everyone? Mom lost her job. My tuition is frozen. Half the town is talking about us. Good. Let them talk. Let them see what really goes on behind closed doors in the perfect Braun household. Bernice stood up, her face flushed with anger. You want to know the truth, Jean? Fine. Yes, I had an affair. Yes, I was unhappy. But you know what? I don't regret it. Really? Really. For the first time in years, I felt alive. I felt wanted. Jeff made me remember what it was like to be desired by someone who actually saw me as more than a housekeeper and bill splitter. And how's that working out for you now? Her face crumpled. He won't return my calls. He says it's too complicated, that he needs space. Shocking. It's almost like he was just using you for love and didn't actually care about your happiness. You bastard. Maybe, but I'm a bastard who kept his wedding vows. Mrs., O'Hara cleared her throat. If I may interject, I think there's something you all should know. We turned to look at her. She was smiling with the satisfaction of someone about to drop a bomb. I've been watching this neighborhood for 40 years, and I've seen this exact scenario play out before. The bored housewife, the charming trainer, the betrayed husband. It happened with the Kowalskis in '98, the Hendersons in '05, and the Martinezes just 3 years ago. What's your point? Bernice snapped. My point is that Jeff Maloney has done this before, multiple times. He targets unhappy wives, makes them feel special, gets them to spend money on his business, then moves on when things get complicated. The room went dead silent. You're lying, Bernice whispered. Am I? Ask him about Sandra Martinez, or Lisa Henderson, or any of the other married women who thought they were special to him. I watched my wife's face as the truth sank in. She hadn't been special. She'd been a mark, a target, another middle-aged woman with access to money and a husband who worked long hours. Mrs. O, I said quietly, how long have you known this? I suspected from the beginning, but I confirmed it yesterday when I had lunch with Sandra Martinez. She told me the whole story, how Jeff seduced her, convinced her to invest in his gym, then dropped her when her husband found out. She lost her marriage and $30,000. Bernice sank back onto the couch like she'd been punched. $30,000? About what you mortgaged the house for, isn't it? I asked. Lila was staring at her mother in horror. Mom, you mortgaged our house? I was going to pay it back. Jeff said the gym was going to expand, that we'd be partners. Partners. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mortgaged our home to fund your affair, and you thought you were going to be partners. I loved him. No, you loved the idea of him. You loved feeling young and desirable again. But Jeff Maloney doesn't love anyone but himself. My phone buzzed with a text message. I looked at it and smiled. Speaking of Jeff, he wants to meet, says he has something important to tell me. Don't go, Bernice said quickly. He's angry. He might do something stupid. Let him try. I've been waiting for an excuse to show him what a real man looks like. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Bernice, you might want to call the bank tomorrow. Ask them about the foreclosure proceedings. Turns out when you mortgage your house to a con man, things don't always work out the way you planned. I left them sitting in the wreckage of their delusions and drove to the address Jeff had texted me, the parking lot behind Murphy's Tavern, the kind of place where disagreements got settled with fists instead of lawyers. Perfect. Jeff was waiting by his BMW, which now sported fresh scratches along both sides. Someone had been busy. You've been having a rough week, I observed. You did this, all of it. I didn't make you sleep with my wife. I didn't make you con her out of $30,000. I just made sure people knew what kind of man you really are. You destroyed my business, my reputation. Your business was already failing. Your reputation was built on lies. I just accelerated the inevitable. Jeff stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. You think you're so smart, don't you? Smarter than you. Smart enough to know that hitting me in a public parking lot would be the stupidest thing you could do right now. Maybe I don't care anymore. You should, because unlike you, I actually know how to fight. He swung at me then, a wild haymaker that telegraphed itself from a mile away. I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him past me, then grabbed his arm and used his own weight to slam him face first into the side of his car. Lesson 1, I said, pressing his face against the metal. Never fight angry. I let him go and stepped back. Jeff straightened up, his nose leaking, his expensive shirt torn. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You're done in this town, Jeff. Done with my wife, done with your gym, done pretending to be something you're not. And what are you going to do? Go back to your warehouse job and pretend you won. I'm going to rebuild my life without the people who didn't deserve to be in it, starting tomorrow. I got in my truck and drove away, leaving Jeff slumped on the pavement beside his vandalized car. In the rearview mirror, I watched him pull out his phone, probably calling for help, his shirt stained and face battered. But there was no help coming. Not for him, not for Bernice, not for anyone who'd bet against Gene Braun and lost. The game was almost over. I just had one more move to make. The next morning, I woke up at the lake house to find 3 cars in my driveway. Bernice's Honda, Lila's Nissan, and a car I didn't recognize. Through the window, I could see them all sitting on my porch like some kind of intervention committee. I made coffee and took my time getting dressed. Let them wait. Let them think about what they were going to say. How they were going to try to convince me to be reasonable, to forgive and forget, to go back to being the neighborhood pushover who let his family walk all over him. When I finally opened the door, I found Bernice, Lila, and a woman I'd never seen before. Mid-40s, blonde, expensive clothes, the kind of fake smile that screamed, professional mediator. "Jean," Bernice said, standing up quickly. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen. She's a family counselor. We thought maybe we could all sit down and work through this together. Did you now?" I sipped my coffee and looked at the three women on my porch. And what exactly are we working through? "The breakdown in communication that led to this situation," Dr. Chen said, in the soothing voice of someone who'd been trained to diffuse domestic situations. "I understand there's been infidelity, financial disputes, and some concerning behavior on all sides." Concerning behavior, that's one way to put it. "Dad, please," Lila said. "Can we just talk?" "Like a family?" "We haven't been a family for months, sweetheart. We've been three people living in the same house, lying to each other and pretending everything was fine. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need to address," Dr. Chen interrupted. "Families go through rough patches, but with proper communication and commitment from all parties." Let me stop you right there, Doc. See, you're operating under the assumption that I want this family back together, that I'm interested in forgiveness and healing and all that therapeutic BS. Dr. Chen's smile faltered. "Mr. Braun, I understand you're angry. I'm not angry anymore. Anger was last week. This week, I'm something much more dangerous. I'm focused." I set down my coffee cup and looked at each of them in turn. "Bernice, you had an affair. You mortgaged our house to fund your boyfriend's failing business. You turned our daughter against me and spent months lying to my face. Doctor, Chen here probably told you that I'm supposed to take some responsibility for that I somehow drove you to cheat by being inattentive or emotionally unavailable or whatever excuse is popular this week. Jean, that's not what we're saying. But here's the thing. I don't care why you did it. I only care what you did. And what you did was declare war on our marriage. So I responded accordingly. By destroying our lives, Lila demanded. By fighting back, by refusing to be the victim in my own story, Doctor. Chen leaned forward, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Mr. Braun, what you've done, freezing accounts, interfering with your wife's employment, public humiliation, these are forms of emotional and financial misuse." I laughed. "Misuse? Lady, I haven't even gotten started yet." I pulled out my phone and opened the Facebook app. See, while you three were planning this little ambush, I was planning something of my own. A live stream, you might call it. A chance for everyone in town to hear the real story. "What are you talking about?" Bernice asked, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "I'm talking about full disclosure, complete transparency, everything that's been happening in the Braun household, laid out for all our friends and neighbors to see." I held up my phone, finger hovering over the Go Live button. "Jean, don't," Bernice whispered. "Why not? You wanted excitement, didn't you? You wanted to feel alive? Well, this is about as alive as it gets." I tapped the button. Within seconds, viewers started joining the stream. Mrs. O'Hara. People from work, neighbors, strangers drawn by the promise of small-town drama. "Good morning, everyone. Jean Braun here, broadcasting live from my lake house with some very special guests. Say hello to my wife Bernice, my daughter Lila, and Dr. Sarah Chen, family counselor extraordinaire." The viewer count was climbing, 47, 63, 89, 125. Now, I know there's been some talk around town lately about the Braun family situation, so I thought it was time to set the record straight. Bernice, why don't you tell everyone about your relationship with Jeff Maloney? Jean, please stop this. Come on, don't be shy. Tell them about the Pineview Motel. Tell them about the $30,000 you stole from our home equity to fund his gym. The comments were exploding. OMG, is this really happening? Bernice Braun is a cheater? Someone call the police. And Lila, sweetie, why don't you explain to everyone how you helped cover for your mother's affair? How you called your own father a washed-up loser who didn't deserve respect? Dad, stop, please. But I was just getting warmed up. The viewer count hit 200, then 250. And Doctor? Chen here thinks I should take responsibility for my wife's choices. She thinks I should forgive and forget, maybe go to couples counseling, work on my communication skills. What do you think, folks? Should I take responsibility for my wife's affair? The comments were brutal. Heck no, she made her choice. Dump the cheater. Dr. Chen stood up abruptly. This is completely inappropriate. I'm leaving. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Doc. She hurried to her car while Bernice and Lila sat frozen on the porch, watching their reputations die in real time. Now, I know some of you are wondering what happens next. Well, I'll tell you. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing for divorce. I'm keeping the house, what's left of it after Bernice mortgaged it for her boy toy. I'm keeping the savings accounts, the truck, and anything else that's legally mine. The viewer count hit 300. Lila's college fund? Gone. She can take out student loans like everyone else. Maybe it'll teach her something about loyalty and consequences. Dad, you're destroying our family on Facebook Live, Lila whispered. No, sweetheart. Your mother destroyed our family in a motel room. I'm just making sure everyone knows it wasn't my fault. Bernice finally found her voice. Jean, I know you're hurt, but this is insane. You're humiliating all of us. Good. Maybe next time you'll think twice before cheating on someone who's smarter than you gave him credit for. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch, giving the camera a good view of the lake behind me. See, folks, here's what I've learned over the past week. Respect isn't given, it's taken. For 26 years, I tried to earn respect by being a good husband, a good father, a good neighbor. But good doesn't get you respect in this world. Good gets you taken advantage of. The comments were coming so fast, I couldn't read them all. But you know what does get you respect? Consequences. When people know that crossing you will cost them everything they care about, they start treating you differently. I turned the camera toward Bernice and Lila. These two learned that lesson this week. My wife lost her job, her boyfriend, and her marriage. My daughter lost her college fund and her social media following. Yes, Lila, I saw your follower count drop after I tagged you in some of my posts. Lila was crying now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret. They'd made their choices. Jeff Maloney learned it too. His gym is closing next week. Turns out when people find out you're a serial adulterer who preys on married women, they don't want to give you their money. Who would have thought? I sat back down and looked directly into the camera. So here's my message to anyone who's been counting Gene Braun out. I'm not the man I was last week. That guy was weak, trusting, willing to let people walk all over him for the sake of keeping the peace, but that guy is dead. The viewer count hit 400. The new Gene Braun doesn't forgive, he doesn't forget, and he doesn't lose. I held up a stack of papers I'd been keeping in my jacket pocket. These are the divorce papers I filed this morning. Bernice, you've been served. I'm keeping the house, the truck, the savings, and anything else I can legally claim. You can keep your debt and your regrets. Bernice was sobbing now, but I wasn't done. And just so we're all clear on how this is going to work going forward, anyone who's sided with my wife during this mess, anyone who made excuses for her, anyone who treated me like the bad guy, you're all dead to me. Permanently. I looked at Lila. That includes family members who chose the wrong side. Dad, I'm your daughter. You were my daughter. Now you're just another person who betrayed me. I turned back to the camera for my closing statement. This has been Gene Braun, broadcasting live from the lake house my mother left me, the one place in this world that's completely mine. To everyone who's been watching, remember this moment. Remember what happens when you underestimate the quiet guy, the nice guy, the one who just wants to be left alone. I smiled directly into the camera. They wanted a villain. I showed them heck. I ended the live stream and put my phone away. The silence on the porch was deafening. 437 viewers, I said conversationally. Not bad for a warehouse manager from a small town. Bernice and Lila sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. Their private shame was now public knowledge, shared and commented on by hundreds of people they'd have to face every day for the rest of their lives. Jean, Bernice said finally, her voice barely a whisper. What have you done? I've won. Completely, totally, permanently. I stood up and walked to the door. You can see yourselves out. Don't come back here. This is my sanctuary now, and you're not welcome. I went inside and locked the door behind me, leaving them sitting on the porch with the wreckage of their reputations. Through the window, I watched them eventually get in their cars and drive away, probably to face the comments and questions and stares that would follow them for months. My phone was buzzing with notifications, friend requests, messages, comments on the live stream. I turned it off and poured myself a drink. Outside, the lake was perfectly calm, reflecting the afternoon sun like a mirror. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Not happy. Happiness was for people who hadn't been betrayed by everyone they loved, but peaceful, satisfied. The old Gene Braun would have felt guilty about what he'd just done. He would have worried about going too far, about being cruel, about what people would think. But the old Gene Braun was dead, buried under months of lies and humiliation and betrayal. The new Gene Braun didn't care what anyone thought. He'd learned the most important lesson of his life. In a world full of users and takers and people who mistake kindness for weakness, the only way to survive is to be stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than everyone else. I raised my glass to the lake, to the setting sun, to the perfect silence of a life finally lived on my own terms. They'd wanted a villain. I'd given them something much worse. A man who'd learned to stop caring about being the good guy. And that man was just getting started.